Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday, and I just got to send a special thank you to all of our supporters, all of the people that were watching yesterday's MLK March. We have a great lineup for you guys today, and I'm excited to get right into it. Of course, you guys know I do this with my bestie, Big O. What up, Big O?
It's good to have it's good to be able to call Bay Holiday my bestie. What's happening?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh, I see you bringing all that black girl magic in the studio.
You know what? I had to do it, man. I had to bring up my like news stuff today.
Yo, it was real interesting yesterday because a lot of times when it's a protest or a march or a demonstration, people are used to seeing me out there or a Jake Gravbrot or somebody. And it was all you yesterday. I saw you out there, the selfie stick, and you're asking questions and some of everything. How was it for you?
You know what? It was phenomenal. I gotta say, one of the things.
And actually, let me put up some photos here while you tell everybody about it.
Oh my gosh, Jake, I'm so glad Jake was out there in the field with me. But, honestly, I'm not always the greatest operator with the selfie stick. So I'm happy that it worked out. I'm happy people were watching. And it was a great turnout yesterday, to be honest. So many Seattleites getting out there, people throughout the county, throughout the state, just connecting. You know what I mean? That's really what it was about yesterday. And clearly, Jake at his best right there, giving us some photos, man.
Right. Now, real quick, because I think that we're going to have a conversation with Nikita Oliver and Sade Smith. But the march, it went by Odessa Brown, and people know the story here with Dr. Ben Danielson, who left Children's Hospital, resigned, now with UW Medicine. But then, and so there was some speaking there at Odessa Brown, but it ended up downtown there at Prosecutor Satterberg's office. And maybe you can explain quickly why it ended up there, and on the stream there were signs talking about Satterberg, he's locking up kids.
Yeah, this was, again, another one of those opportunities to educate the community. And ultimately, while we have federal regulations that are really trying to make sure that children are tried as children and no longer tried as adults, we have our prosecutor right here, Dan Satterberg, trying to actually reverse that decision for Washington State, utilizing taxpayer dollars to do so. And this was what Sade mentioned yesterday, is that we have to press, that we have to make sure that the prosecutor's office knows that we're not for this. And if you are, fine, he's doing what you want. But there's a lot of people who were just outraged, honestly, to hear that this is what's going on right here in our state.
Right. So me personally, I don't have a lot of details on it. I just know a bunch of generalities, but I also do know that we've got a good communication relationship with the prosecutor's office. So, reach out to the prosecutor's office over there. We've had Prosecutor Satterberg on the show before. We talked about gun violence rate in King County and about domestic violence. So perhaps we can get the prosecutor on here as well as somebody like Sade, so we can inform the public. Want to let everybody know as well. I forgot to say this at the top of the hour. I was just too distracted by all of this greatness going on over here next to me. We got OPA Director Andrew Myerberg. He's here. We got a bunch of questions. We put it out to the Twitter sphere yesterday, which can be good, bad, and dangerous at times. And so we got a lot of questions from Twitter and some other stuff. We're talking to Director Myerberg. A lot to talk about, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that we got it out there on Twitter because honestly, people have amazing questions for Director Myerberg. I mean, they're asking the real things. It's not just about, man, screw him. They're trying to get information. I think that, so many of us wanted to understand and learning through Converge and having Director Myerberg doing these interviews so that we can understand what OPA is really all about.
Yeah. So, I haven't talked to Director Myerberg in some months. It was last year. We actually Converge had an exclusive when they released the first batch of findings. A lot of people in the city weren't quite happy with the findings. But we discussed it and broke it down. We'll see. Some people definitely aren't happy with these findings here. Unfortunately, I guess it's still out there. Jake could bring it into me. And I had to print out one of these things, man. It's like I killed a tree. It was like 27 pages or something. But we're going to talk to the director. We're going to be asking a lot of questions. Real quick, we're gonna move through here, and we're also gonna bring Nikki Barron in here in a little bit because we're gonna do the COVID update before we go to the director, because I know we're gonna be going there. I got a quick clip here about Governor Inslee and the state of Washington's plan to team up with like the big three, with Costco, with Starbucks, and with Microsoft as far as vaccine locations.
The governor calling in the likes of Costco, Microsoft, and Starbucks at their Soto headquarters here to build out and streamline these sites.
We believe this is an opportunity to come together, unite around a common goal, and to support our public sector leaders as they work to scale up vaccination capability across the state of Washington.
That's Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson explaining why the company, known for jolts of caffeine, will be focusing on a different kind of double shot.
And so here in the Trier Center, it is the
Starbucks is providing space in its Trier Center Innovation Lab at its Seattle headquarters to provide engineering and analytical support, using computer modeling reserved normally for coffee distribution and store site selection to the public health effort. Operation Warp Speed has, to this point, been more like a slow trickle. The state has only used roughly a third of vaccine supply on hand, and the national stockpile has no reserves. An Associated Press analysis says only 2.6% of Washington's population has received a dose. That's led to long lines at pop-up sites like one in Sequim last week. This public-private partnership also seeks to eliminate that with these new mass vaccination sites next week and moving to Phase 1B now, allowing anyone over 65 to get a shot if they want.
Facilities.
Microsoft's Brad Smith says the Redmond campus could also soon be a vaccination site.
So we're going to be working with local hospitals so that they can administer their vaccines in a building on our campus. We'll provide support staff to make that possible and to reduce the costs. The goal is to make this in February one of the mass vaccination sites. This is not going to be a site for Microsoft employees. This is going to be a site for people in the community.
All right, so they're trying to get innovative here. I mean, these are companies that know how to do stuff on large scale. When you talk about Starbucks, Costco, Microsoft, then also, you know, they're opening up the vaccine. You saw a big rush out there, the footage they showed in Sequim. But bringing it back here locally, you know, there's a vaccine location that's opening up in the Central District, or very close to the Central District at Seattle University. Can you please bring in Nikki Barron? There she is.
Good morning.
Nikki, you got the best home studio in America. She coming crispy, huh?
Yeah, nice and right. She knows what's up.
All right, Nikki, you know, we got a full show here today with Director Myerberg, so I'll let you get right into it.
Yeah, so let's start with the COVID numbers just to get us started. So, just so you guys know, we didn't get numbers reported yesterday because of the holiday. So these are the numbers since they were last reported. And it says it's since the 16th. So the numbers are another 1,817 coronavirus cases have been reported in Washington, bringing the total of cases to 289,939. So if you put the probable cases and the confirmed cases together, just so you guys understand where I got that math, including 3,903 deaths, according to the State Department of Health. We have about 16,558 people who have been hospitalized in the state due to the virus as well. So our hospital capacity is sitting at about 85.5 last time I checked, and a positivity rate of 17.7. Nationally, we've hit 24 million cases, so we're up about 170,000 cases since yesterday. We've almost hit that 400,000 lives lost. We're at about 398,000. So we lost an additional 1,730 people yesterday nationwide. And yeah, we're losing about 3,500 people each day here in the United States, and it's pretty jarring. If you look at the math, actually, we've lost more people from the coronavirus than we have lost in the last 10 years from the flu combined.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Nikki.
Yeah.
Every time you do the comparisons, honestly, that's what like smacks it home, right? Because if we just focus on the coronavirus numbers, honestly, it's like, okay, well, you know, hey, we're doing good in Seattle. We're doing good in Washington State by all of these things. But when you talk about the comparisons like that, it really hits home, Nikki.
All right, Nikki, what's this that we see that Seattle University, that, by the way, a lot of that land that Seattle University actually owns, everything else, used to really be considered the Central District. Yeah. And that's why Seattle University has these programs there for fighting gentrification and everything else, because part of the university growth definitely gentrified the neighborhood. All of that being said, though, sounds like there's a vaccine location that's going to be at Seattle U.
Yeah, and this one comes from our friends at the Capitol Hill Seattle blog. So there is a community COVID-19 vaccination clinic opening at Seattle University, and that threshold has now been lowered down to 65 and above. And so if you want to access vaccinations, the easiest way is to go to Phase Finder and the Washington State Phase Finder. Put in your information, and it will let you know where you can go to get a vaccine. It's also a good idea to call ahead to make sure that they are accepting new vaccinations patients. You can also call your primary care doctor on the Phase Finder page. You'll also find resources to see which hospital systems are distributing, and then follow up calling your primary care doctor to see if they can vaccinate you. But at this point, there are really long lines, but that shouldn't stop you from getting in line. When you do Phase Finder, you can also sign up to get a notification for when it's your turn. So even if you're not 65 and above or 50 in a multi-generational household, go over there, sign up, get a notification, because that way you'll know exactly when it's your turn to get in line, actually physically at the vaccination place.
Right, and it's good to know, this is Converge Media. Central District is our home. Yeah. And so that's when I saw that there was a vaccination location so close to the Central District that we wanted to talk about it. Before we let you go here briefly, Nikki, is there anything else that we should know or anything you want to tell us for your coronavirus update show tomorrow?
Tomorrow we'll be doing the headlines. I think with the increase in news in other areas, we're going to have to continue to have the show kind of where we give the more robust updates. So if you want to hear more about the variations that have been discovered in Washington State, Oregon, and California, tune in tomorrow, 6:15, right here, wherever you're watching. I'll also be hitting, more on the governor's announcement, as well as sort of vaccine rollout in general, how it's going, and what experts are predicting. So 6:15 tomorrow night, right here where you're watching.
All right. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Nikki's home studio is fire. By the way, and especially I talk to you, we get a lot of people in city government to watch the morning update show. And I'll be honest with you, some of y'all home setup, man, it's trash, And at this point, early on, it was like, you got some old school Logitech camera, you got, trying to figure it out. At this point, man, y'all got to step your game up. And so, you let us know over here at Converge. Nikki Barron will be happy to build you like a home studio. If you're a business person, that's the suit these days. How good your home studio is. Somebody, oh man, this sure is about business. Their joint looks good, right? That's what I'm saying.
It's true. It speaks volumes, y'all. And clearly, Nikki's got her finger on the pulse when it comes to home studio.
Nikki got it on lock. So yesterday, celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. There we go. Thank you. Yesterday, celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and other day would have been 90. They said 92 years old, and somebody put it in good comparison because we think of this as different eras, but you got to think Betty White just turned 99, and so Martin Luther King would have been 92. But the Trump administration, they came out with their 1776 report. Trump administration created a 1776 commission to rebuff the New York Times 1619. And basically, man, I'm going to play this for you. This is a short clip from MSNBC.
Martin Luther King Jr. would have turned 92 years old this week, 7 years younger than Betty White, to get a sense of how close this history is. We celebrate a holiday commemorating MLK just 12 days after a white supremacist riot stormed the United States Capitol carrying the flag of Donald Trump. And if it is still unclear to you at this late date what position Trump and his administration have on the forces of white supremacy that course through our history, look no further than their official White House document released today on MLK Day titled The 1776 Report. It was commissioned last fall as an obvious attempt to rebut the 1619 Project, the New York Times Magazine, which was an examination of the history and enduring consequences of the institution of American slavery. Today's report from the White House reads like, oh man, I don't know, like a sophomore year term paper maybe by Stephen Miller, using images of Martin Luther King Jr., Frederick Douglass, and Abraham Lincoln while defending America's founding on slavery, all stamped with the weight of the U.S. government.
Okay, so here we go. Hey, they fight back, they punch back. Okay, look, let me just say this. For those of you who need a history lesson, there is a song called Slave Owners by Eric Robertson. What I did before hitting the march yesterday with my son and his friend Jermaine, I literally played this song for them, amongst other songs that really gave them some history. And I am encouraging you all to listen to that right now because it talks directly about this in our founding fathers. When we think about George Washington, President Jefferson, President Jackson, you are talking about people who owned hundreds of slaves. And I don't mean 50, 60, I mean hundreds. In the multiple hundreds of slaves. Could you imagine actually right now, the way that you live, having hundreds of people that provide free labor to you, and what you get is the wealth that amasses from all of that labor? Could you imagine? And at the end of the song, Eric Robertson plays a clip from Donald Trump, literally saying, okay, so what now? I mean, are we going to tear down Stonewall Jackson? Are we going to tear down this person? Are we going to tear down this? At the end of the day, he says, yes. Why? Because it's up to us to be educated. We can no longer be living on these false histories, these false hopes of what America actually was. It was never great, y'all, at the end of the day. And it's up to us to make it great. Oh, that's all I got to say.
Yeah. Okay. That doesn't leave a lot for me. I mean, this is wild. The crazy thing is most of those statues down south, they weren't erected right after slavery. A lot of them were erected there in the 60s and the 50s and everything else as symbolic. But we need to do a whole show on that. But anyways, that's what came out. Stephen Miller got his last jab in there. Before we go to break here and we come back with Director Myerberg, Trey, there's a new coffee that's out there. Oh. Do you know about this coffee?
Oh yeah.
Let me bring this here. So this coffee right here, it's fine. Oh yeah. This coffee right here, this is what's called New Woke coffee. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And if people all of a sudden, they're taking a sip of this coffee right here. And by the way, you can pick up a Converge mug by going to whereweconverge.com/shop, $12. Makes a great gift. But this is called the New Woke coffee. And, it's a lot of new woke out there. And anytime that we want to do these kind of interviews, or we want to bring in OPA director or something like that, they're like, Omari, man, you're platforming. You should be outraged. You should be this, blah, 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 blah. And man, they're just suddenly so woke. And people don't realize that it's like, I tell them, well, welcome to the party. Let me pour you a double. Let me take you back into the time machine, ladies and gentlemen. 26 years ago. 26 years ago. So when people are talking all this, where's my outrage? Where's this and that? Blah, 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 blah. You should be whatever. That's just because you're recently outraged.
And, that was our argument. They're college students. What are you stopping them for? They haven't broken any laws. What's the big deal for 14 officers? 14. And so from there, I guess they decided to arrest us. We were too big of a public nuisance for them. And they grabbed me first down the stairs. At that time, I wore glasses trying to look pretty for your TV.
Okay, so you weren't actually in the car. You were what, in the house?
They were in the car. I was in the house. I saw my brother being stopped by the police, and I came outside.
Okay.
To join in with him. From there, after the arrest, during the arrest, I was grabbed. I was about 4 steps up. They grabbed me off the stairs, slammed me onto the police car. My glasses, which I was wearing them, came off, and I had really poor vision. I was pretty disoriented from there. But
now, was this one police officer that grabbed you?
Oh, yeah, it was one police officer at first, and there was another officer assisted him. And I was slammed onto the car, hit my chest, then my head, and my arrest was affected. And they got 2 other people. Then my brother last. They shackled his hands and feet. he was transported that way to the East Precinct. And once we got to the East Precinct, wow, they brought my brother out of the car. A female officer and two male officers brought him out the car. He was still shackled, mind you. The female officer proceeded to stomp his head into the cement. Talking about, oh, it's not funny now, is it? It's not funny now. I bet you're sorry now. Stomping his head. And
he's hitting you. You're saying he's putting his foot on the side of your head and
my brother's head was just stomping into the cement. And boy, from there, I knew it was serious. I wasn't scared to be arrested because my mother always told me, you know, if you're right, don't be scared to go to jail. We always saw growing up Dr. King going to jail because Chief Bull Connors was over there getting him off of something, you know, and he wasn't scared because he knew in the end, you know, morally, Dr. King was right. And that was the whole premise, you know, we were saying, not to say in my mind, I was saying, well, Dr. King went to jail, but that was the whole premise. We all knew the police arrest you now, but if you're right, don't be scared. So I wasn't scared until we got into the holding area. My glasses are off, I'm disoriented, and the officer starts wailing away at me at the holding area, and it's a whole room full of white officers. And I'm saying, did you see that? Oh, I'm crying. Remind you, I'm a big fella now. Back then, I was a little fella. I'm crying.
You were what? How old were you at this time?
I was 15 years old. I was about 6 foot, 160 pounds. And I'm just crying. Did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see that? And all I heard was just laughing by the officers. Oh, you must be hallucinating. You don't have your glasses on.
So as these people out here in Seattle drink their new woke coffee and they're like, oh, where's your outrage? Where's your this and that? Like I said, welcome to the party. Let me pour you a double. Where you been at the last 30 years? Where you been? You just now? Did George Floyd get you so irate? Because clearly Charlene Lyles didn't. Clearly 10 years ago, John T. Williams didn't. Oh, the East Precinct, now it gets you riled up. We got our asses whooped there 30 years ago. Where were you? So I'm going to tell all you new woke people out there with your new woke coffee, get off my damn back. Do some research. You know what I'm saying? We're going to go to break right now. We come back. We got OPA Director Myerberg. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city. I did it for the love. I did it for the people. I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
And so and this is good here. You can go to the wide real quick. And I was so we have Director Myerberg. Looks like I'm frozen. Oh, that might just be me, huh? Are we good?
I think so. You're on my side.
Oh, okay. Great. Sorry about that. There's your TV there. They're frozen. So I'm here with Director Myerberg. And you know, he just saw that clip. And when you see that clip, let me pull this back in here.
Sorry, what is it? What are you looking for? Your
Yeah, okay. We're good. Let me just keep it moving here. If you say I'm good over there. When I talked to the Director Myerberg, he just brought this up that it was like 30 years ago, and that's actually when my mom, you know, when I talk about the super woke folk, you know what I'm saying? 30 years ago, it was Mothers Against Police Brutality, which is now Mothers for Police Accountability. So, you know what I'm saying? My family has had a long tradition and work in this accountability space. And you were just saying that you didn't know that was my mom. So, you know, just bringing it to you. And it's a lot of people out there who just make an assumption that this is something that's new and some of everything else. Okay, I feel more comfortable now. I just want to let everybody know I lost my monitor, and I'm like, but yeah, I mean, it's real deal. And I'm gonna get to you in 1 second, Director Myerberg. A lot of stuff here, man. I just gotta put that out there though, because like I said, there's a lot of people here who just new woke, man. You know what I'm saying? And welcome. And if it took the events of this summer to get you out here on social media or whatever you're doing, then that's great. But just know, you know what I'm saying, there's a body of work. There's some people who got a body of work out here, and you might want to do some research on that. All right, Director Andrew Myerberg, OPA, welcome to the Morning Update Show.
Thanks, Mark.
How are you today?
I'm all right.
All right, real quick. Some people they don't exactly know what OPA does and what the job of the director is. So maybe you can tell them here quickly.
Sure. OPA, for those that don't know, OPA is the internal affairs for the Seattle Police Department. We are a civilian sworn hybrid. And what that means is that I'm a civilian. I'm not a cop. I'm a lawyer. I run the office and I make the final decisions that come out of the office. And our staff is a combination of civilian and sworn. Right now we have 2 civilians and 10 sworn, and that's a function of the contract. But we also have civilian supervisors, and one side of the house, our policy and community outreach group is all civilian.
Right. All right. So want to get to a few things here. First thing is, it looks a little whatever on there. Let's see if we can figure that out. First thing is some of these findings. The first finding that I want to talk about is what we call here the pink umbrella. That was the pink umbrella day. That was June 1st. June 1st. Let me find it here. That was the day up there we call the Western Barricade. A lot of people might remember the pink umbrella. We caught it on tape where, really all hell broke loose up there on Capitol Hill, and the tear gas ended up coming out.
We're right here at the East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now. That's the barricade. Again, if we see the bike officers here, if we see the bike officers tapped out, then people should be concerned. As long as the bike officers are in front, I think that we're okay. You know, they have a reinforcement behind them. But we've seen here the last 4 days, what we've seen the last 4 days is and there it is, they're getting tapped out. They're getting tapped out right there. We have a definite change in posture. We have a definite change in posture right here at the East Precinct. And what I just told you right there is when a bicycle officer gets tapped out by an officer with a gas mask, they've changed their posture and position here at the East Precinct. What we could expect next is tear gas. Why tear gas and possibly flashbangs? Why we say that is, and now they done brought out the troopers. And I'm gonna tell you something, the troopers ain't got no problem firing. These guys, the troopers ain't got no issue letting loose. We saw the troopers on Saturday. Now this situation is escalating. If you know anybody, tag and share this stream. This is right now live at East Precinct. The officers have changed their posture. This gentleman right here grabbed the barricade, and now you see they're reinforcing the barricade. We have not heard an audible anything from an authority here. The umbrellas are out. We're getting pushed back. Don't spray that shit. Don't spray it. Don't spray it. Okay, the umbrellas are here. You see people put out the umbrellas to block the spray. It's rowdy right here. Hold on. Let me bring it down. Let's just try to de-escalate. Let's try to de-escalate this. Let's just try to bring this down, guys. You know, it's a lot of worse shit than going to jail, like a flashbang, shrapnel, or something. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this shit down. So we see him grabbing the umbrella. There's the spray. It's on now. It's on. East Precinct, they're losing control. State police are trying to open the barricade. They're putting the pepper spray in the air. Share this stream. Tag and share this stream. God damn it, they got me, you motherfuckers. I'm gonna eat this shit though. There it is. It's a crush. I got pepper spray all over me. They're not moving. I got sprayed, but shit, been through worse. Barricade is up. Barricade is up. The officers are coming with the spray. And this is exactly what's happened here. Get the fuck out my way. Let's see here. This is what's going on. I only got one eye. These are flashbangs. This is flashbangs that they're deploying. Hey, bring this shit down. Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it down. This is, share this stream. God damn it. It's the tear gas. It's the fucking tear gas. Police, stop. Holy shit. Tear gas is everywhere. Holy shit. Oh, shit.
Man, so June 1st, 2020, I mean, even just looking at this video, which is like, man, every time, and actually we had promised our audience that we weren't gonna just play this, but I think it's important today that we play, some of this footage here. Director Myerberg, there's a long list of things here that says not sustained, removed, or whatever, but this was sustained here. Maybe you can tell people as to what you found.
Sure. So when we were evaluating this case, the fundamental question for us was the decision to disperse that crowd, like what we just saw in the video, was that consistent with policy? And then all the things that flowed from that, all the blast balls, the CS gas, the OC spray, was that all consistent with policy? So we investigated 3 different supervisors, all of whom were in various levels of command. And ultimately we identified that the supervisor that's referred to in there as, I think it's named employee 1, was the one that was making the call on the ground to disperse and then to disperse using those tools. So we found that the decision to disperse the crowd violated policy, and so did the use of the blast balls, the CS gas, and the OC spray that followed.
In that tape, I mean, it was so many things that even when we watched it, there was nothing audible, and you hear me on the video. There's been no audible. No one's telling people to move. No one's telling people to disperse. You couldn't hear, anything out there. 2, it's like, especially after seeing Washington, D.C., they said that this was a violent crowd. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody's going to make their own judgment, man. But, compared to what we've seen in these situations, that I wouldn't consider that violent. But these people, thousands of people peacefully protesting there. The other thing is, man, how much did that change in posture? Would you hear me on tape? I'm like, you know what? As long as the bike police are here, everything's going to be cool. Only thing we got to worry about is if they get tapped out by the officers in the gas mask, and that indicates a change in posture. And if the gas mask comes out, we can expect tear gas. How much does the change in posture play in elevating the anxiety there on the front line?
Yeah, I think it played a significant role. And I think after that incident, or certainly in the later days of the protest, SPD didn't do that anymore because I think they saw that it escalated the crowd. I mean, the reality is that this is a different protest than what we saw in some of the other days. I think, you were there for May 30th and for June 2nd and some of the other days that were more violent. I agree with you. This was not a violent crowd. There were people pushing the barricades, but from what we could tell, there's no active threat that would have warranted that use of CS gas and other less lethal tools. I think there were orders, Omari, earlier that evening to stop pushing the barricades, to stay off the barricades. But again, we saw one projectile thrown. There's not widespread violence in the crowd. And you're right. I mean, there's thousands of people. So even if you're saying the people in the front, even if you could say they posed a threat, what about the hundreds and thousands of other people there in the crowd?
Well, I mean, and I say this all the time because my position is that this is very true, that on June 1st and the other days, the tear gas came out on Capitol Hill. Protesters didn't get tear gas. A neighborhood that had protesters in it got tear gas.
Agreed.
Police tear gas their own office.
Yeah.
Like the East Precinct was just 100 feet behind them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think the issue is, I think what we've seen kind of top to bottom was that the protest, I mean, SPD made a number of mistakes. I don't think anyone is debating that. I mean, this was a big one for us. And I think there were other cases that were focused more, that we issued in this last grouping of cases that were more individual officer focused, so blast ball deployments. But as far as a command failure and something we saw as just from top down a poor decision. This was that case.
Yeah, the thing is as well is when all this comes out about the Seattle protests and the books are written, and everybody's got a documentary these days.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, but the tear gas coming out on June 1st definitely made a lot new protesters. There was a lot of people who weren't even in the protest before, but once they're sitting at home and they got tear gas, or their kids are breathing in tear gas and all this other kinds of stuff. They're in a coffee shop and everything else. It changed the trajectory of the protests up there on Capitol Hill.
And I agree. I agree with that. I think that's what we've seen too, is that things shifted after that point. The other thing that was told to us in the interviews that we conducted was that there was some intelligence from the FBI that there was going to be damage, or that people were going to come after and try to burn the precinct. We tried to figure out where that came from. We couldn't find out necessarily. There was no documentation that we found, but again, those are the types of things that we were told in the interviews that we conducted.
Yeah, we keep hearing that there was a credible threat. I mean, clearly, when the FBI has a real credible threat, you see they gear up and all this other kinds of stuff. No one has still ever been able to tell us the credible threat that occurred that the FBI said they had. And I don't know if this is something that your office investigating as well, is who gave the order to leave the East Precinct, because no one can actually tell us that this person, this name, this badge number, or this elected official gave the order to leave the East Precinct.
Yeah, we are investigating that case, and we're almost finished with our interviews. We're speaking to folks in the mayor's office, but we've interviewed SPD folks and we've interviewed Chief Best. So I think we're pretty close to issuing findings, and I think we know how the decision was made and who made the decision.
I'm gonna hold you to this now.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to come back.
Okay.
For when you release the findings of the East Precinct, man, I could talk about this one incident the whole show, but there's a few other things, and there's some stuff from Twitter that we want to get to as well. A real big thing right now is actually while we're on these issues right here and these findings, I got a video that's gone viral here from speculation, kind of highlighting a few other things here in these findings. And it also leads to the question of what is the actual written reprimand? What does that mean? Let me play this. This is about 60 seconds.
I want to remind you that if you are a person who experiences what you believe is an inappropriate use of force, please do report it. It will be investigated appropriately. Any use of force was outside of compliance, an officer will be held accountable.
Jesus. Christ.
Anytime we use force, it's investigated, it's looked at, it's reviewed. We have the most accountability of any place in the country, and I mean that sincerely.
Oh.
We're moving.
Okay.
You're good. Go this way.
So no one is going to use force and it go unchecked and unnoticed.
Hey, bring this shit down! Bring it down! Bring it down! Bring it down! Bring it down! Share this stream! God damn it!
So right there is saying that no officer has been disciplined beyond a written reprimand for anything 2020. A few things there. There's long threads on Twitter and lots of analysis on everything else. Man, why hasn't anybody been disciplined? What is a written reprimand actually mean?
So there's a couple questions there. I'll answer your first one first. So multiple officers have discipline pending for the cases, particularly the officers that use force, including suspensions. When OPA recommends a finding, and then when we sit down with the chain of command and we recommend discipline, that then goes to the chief of police. The officer then has the right under the contract and due process and the law to go before the chief and argue for himself or herself as to why the discipline should be overturned or lower. So it's a process. Once that is done, and none of those cases have finished that process, once that's done, the chief will make a final call and that will become public. The case in which was on the video where there's the officer riding into the back of the two individuals walking the street, that was from months and months and months ago. That's not from the protests that occurred. So I think it's correct that discipline hasn't been imposed yet, but it's incorrect to say that it won't be. It will be. And frankly, I think, from what I've seen on Twitter, and I try to stay away from Twitter, but, people I think want termination and nothing less. If that's what they want, people are not going to be satisfied.
Now, and just to be clear, all you can do is you can make a recommendation, but anything really comes down to the chief. It's up to the chief whether the chief accepts your recommendation, whether the chief warrants out a punishment, whether the chief fires. All you can do is recommend, and all you can do is put somebody up against the standard of what the policy is. So you can just say if they're in policy or out of policy.
Yep. So that's my job. And I can't even say that they violated criminal law. I can say in or out of policy.
I'll be honest with you. It just really sounds like, it is the biggest, I guess you would say, complaint or feedback about OPA. It just kind of seems like, your hands are tied, or it's almost like your job is just to be like, and maybe it is, did this officer meet up to the policy or not meet the policy? Yeah. So even if it's a bad policy, if the officer didn't break the policy, they've done nothing wrong.
So yeah, I think that's correct. That is my job, right? Like my job is to call balls and strikes, is to apply the policy. It's not to go and create the policy that I want to see. Sometimes I do that, right? Is I can recommend. So as a result of the cases we saw with the overhand deployments, right? My recommendations to the department is prohibit overhand deployments. So we'll see if the department does that. I don't know whether they will do it. I can't compel them to do it, right? But if the policy says a certain thing, I can only hold officers to what that policy says. I don't get to create the policy as I want to see it.
All right, and we're going to get to this mask here, but you're talking about policy. I talked to Inspector General Lisa Judge here, and really on two issues. One was about SPOG, and what she talked about was that some of the powers of OIG and some powers of OPA are restricted because of collective bargaining in the SPOG contract. But Lisa Judge here talks a little bit about how OPA and OIG and how you're supposed to go after specific officers, and her job is the overarching policies of it. Man, we want to get, and that's why I talked to the IG, we want to get all the right people in the room, because ultimately, if the policies are the issue, right? And your job is to be like, did somebody meet up to the policy, but you can't necessarily change the policy. And the OIG's job is to go with systemic changes. Then it's like, anyway, let me play this. We'll circle back around.
A lot of times people will see a decision that's come out of OPA and they're not happy about it, but really OPA is making a decision about whether an officer violated policy or not. So, if there's a decision that's made by OPA that people are unhappy about, it's probably more a problem of that the policies need to be fixed or implemented or something. And so it's, Director Myerberg's analysis is also limited by the system. So he's the one that tries to weed out bad apples, if we're going to use an analogy. My job is to look at things like the barrel and how long the apple's been in there and who put the apple in there and things like that, the systemic parts of it. So if he finds, let's say, in the macing of the pepper spray of the child incident this summer, that the officer did not violate policy, that's the limited environment he's working under. My job now, and with Sentinel Event Review, this is one of the things we're going to look at, is what's the broader issue? Because even if it's not a violation of policy, that's an outcome that we don't want.
Is this a good breakdown of this?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more, yes, it's a good breakdown. It's a little bit more complex. So SPD has policies that govern a whole bunch of different things, right? How an officer interacts with you, how they're supposed to write tickets a certain way, how they do X, how they do Y, right? But some of the policies come from law, right? So the Supreme Court, Graham v. Connor, sets out a standard for when is force consistent with law, is it reasonable, necessary, and proportional. No policy change that I make is going to change that, right? That is a Supreme Court case law standard that applies to all uses of force. We talked a little bit off the the record, Amari, about legislation, right? What legislation is pending? You know, one bill that's pending is to look into the reasonableness standard, right? So when I look at force, I say, would a reasonable officer, with that officer's training and experience, is that a reasonable decision? That's what I'm required to do. I don't have an option. That's my job, right? I don't get to substitute my opinion for that officer's or Twitter's opinion from that officer's. That's not my job. So I'm calling balls and strikes, and I'm trying to, where I can, identify issues and policies and make those changes. And I do that a lot. I mean, I think there's this misnomer that I don't. I mean, I think I make between 30 and 40 policy recommendations a year, right? And I think 80 some odd % of those are implemented. So am I not moving fast enough? Maybe not for some people that are watching this show, right? Am I changing every single possible that I can? No, because I can only advise on policies. I can't compel them. But we have changed policies. We're trying to move the system forward. It just may not be in the way that everyone wants me to do that job.
All right, we're gonna come back to policies here in a minute. There's a few things. One big thing that we saw here, and if nothing else in 2020, I guess the SPD and the OPA have stepped up their social media game. But there's this original tweet right here from Casual Weekend Mom, and it was about seven tweets. I'm an ER nurse in Seattle. Last night, Seattle Police Department officer came to the ER to obtain a statement from the assault patient. One officer, Eric Whitehead, blatantly refused to put on a mask while standing in a high traffic hallway. There were COVID positive patients in a new room nearby. It goes on and on. 55,000, probably even more at this point, 55,000 retweets, 115,000 likes. So then SPD pops in. First, thank you and your colleagues for your work during the pandemic. All of our officers have previously been directed to use face masks, PPE to protect themselves and others. Please contact OPA about this incident so they can start a review. And then here's OPA. Last night, OPA initiated an investigation into an allegation by an ER nurse that an SPD officer refused to wear a mask in the hospital. So maybe you can tell us about this. Also, we got a statement here from this ER nurse.
Yeah, so we were notified whenever the night this happened, we were notified of it. There's about an hour and 20-minute body-worn video that's recorded by the officer. So I watched the body-worn video. You know, we're going to evaluate whether or not, well, first of all, I mean, it's clear the officer's not wearing a mask. So, but the issue is, you know, is the way he approached the nurse and interacts with the nurse and her supervisors unprofessional. So that's what we're looking into. We've already started to interview nursing staff. I'm sure that some won't want to talk to us just because they don't want to be in the public eye. And I'm sure but I'm sure we'll be able to lock down some of the statements, then interview the officer, and then that's the investigation. So this should be a fairly quick one.
All right, and let me see here. I have her statement. It's kind of long here. Overall, I'm not with the political agenda or make it about winning or losing or blindly taking down cops. As a voter and a taxpayer, I pay for the police. They're public employees with the job to protect and serve, and it's totally unacceptable for an officer to act in exactly the opposite of that by violating rules put in place to maintain health and safety in a hospital. There needs to be consequences for these actions beyond the police department making a statement that they're looking into it and then failing to act. And now SPD, we got a lot of stuff in here, man. It's just.
I mean, let me just say while you're looking for
Sure.
them, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's nothing I disagree with in that statement. The officer should have been wearing a mask.
Right. SPD, this was just an article. SPD reaffirms mask guidelines. So, and also you guys, and maybe you could explain this here real quick, is that people can go and file a complaint with OPA, or OPA can initiate an investigation. Now, I read in the OPA tweet, it was like you initiated an investigation.
So I think, I want to say that the nurse, I'm not totally positive, but I want to say that the nurse may have filed something online. If you file something online with our office over the weekends, our admins don't work over the weekends. So I independently reviewed the video and added other allegations and concerns that I saw from the video. So the complainants will probably be the nurse and then OPA. So I think it's a combination of the two. There are times that we will watch video or we'll watch something and we'll self-initiate, but generally, even when we self-initiate, we've gotten other complaints too. So there's an amalgam of community members and OPA that are the complainants.
All right, you can look there at that monitor, Seattle Police Accountability Office investigating the actions of officers in D.C. during Capitol building attack. What's going on?
He's just turning it over to me. So an SPD officer saw a picture on social media of two other officers and a third who was a retired officer that were at the Capitol building, or not, we don't know at the Capitol building, but at the protest that occurred in DC on the date in question. So we got a referral from the department. They want us to look into it. We're looking into it. I mean, the question for us is, did these officers cross the barricade? Did they go into the Capitol building? If so, the chief's been pretty clear that they'll be terminated. But I want to make clear, because I looked at your Twitter feed too. I think people are saying to us, well, terminate them for being at the protest. That's not constitutional. They have a First Amendment right to be at the protest. If they violate the law, it's a different question. So I just want to be super clear with people to not have unrealistic expectations. There's no legal basis for an officer to be fired simply because they went to a protest.
Yeah, and we've said that here on Converge as well, that if the officers went there, President Trump spoke at the ellipse, addressed the crowd and everything else, there's people, that's their constitutional rights to be able to sit there and gather. I think the issue is now, did they violate the border or the barrier there at the Capitol? Did they enter the Capitol?
And just to be clear, if that happened, so we would look at, so if we find any evidence that suggests that, we're going to send it outside to the FBI to investigate. We wouldn't investigate the criminal acts, but the FBI would look at it, and then we would get it back, and we would do our administrative investigation when that's done.
All right, so maybe you can explain this though, because we always hear that it's hard for the chief of police to fire people. It's hard for people to leave and everything else. Maybe this right here is a Seattle Times. Seattle police chief fires officer for racist remark after fellow officers report on him. If you can kind of take us through this timeline here, and then also, what role did the union play or not play? And is this officer actually fired, or will, are they gonna?
So we got a complaint. So four officers went to a hospital, and in the hospital they dealt with a man who was in crisis, who appeared to be of African descent, and they eventually trespassed him from the hospital. The next day they were talking amongst themselves, and one of the officers, the one who was terminated, said to the other officers, "You remember that guy we interacted with, Kunta Kinte?" The officers confronted him, was like, that's a racist statement. He doubled down and walked away and just said, "No, it's not." The three officers then reported in a memo to their supervisor, reported that a racist comment was made, and the supervisor sent that to OPA, and we did our investigation. So we brought the officer in, we interviewed the officer. He didn't deny making the statement. He said he didn't understand the significance of the term, but we found that he violated policy, bias policing, and professionalism. So the chain of command agreed, and there was a termination recommendation that went to the chief, and the chief terminated the officer. And as far as the union did not appeal the termination.
Yeah, so the union was like, yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think this year, this is obviously not a fact that people want to know, but I think, the union has, appealed only 2 or 3 cases the entire year, including, and has not appealed a number of terminations that have occurred this year. So in that respect, I think that credit is where credit is deserved, and I think they did not appeal this case, and they could have.
I don't think they wanted that smoke, man.
No.
Like, let's be real.
But it's still the right decision.
Yeah, of course it's the right decision. They ain't what. How they gonna defend that? 2 things here. I know you said that you don't legislate by Twitter, which is a good thing.
Can I go back and answer while you're looking? One question
Sure.
that you asked about the written reprimand, and we get this question a lot about discipline levels. So generally, the way discipline works is all disciplines governed by precedent, right? So when discipline is issued to an officer, what you do is you look at the officer's past history, and then you look at other similar cases. If you don't do that, the reality is that an arbitrator will later overturn the discipline. This is all theory of law called just cause. Discipline and findings have to be supported by the law. And if, for example, for that riding into the back of the person with the bike, right? If we had recommended a 30-day suspension for that individual, it would have been overturned by an arbitrator. So what happens is, the way discipline works is you give discipline, and then it's called progressive discipline. So if an officer revisits the same conduct, the discipline goes up, up, up. Very rarely, and you ask this, like, what does a written reprimand do? The answer is, I don't know, right? But my other answer is that what we've seen is that very rarely do officers repeat the same misconduct over and over and over again. And where they do, they generally get terminated. So I guess what I would argue is that what a written reprimand does is it puts an officer on notice that you can't do that again, right? And it puts that in their permanent file like you would in any other employer. And generally, what we've seen is that they don't revisit that conduct.
Right. And I mean, that was really one of my first questions there.
Right.
And another question here. I mean, the good thing is that, man, people are actually interested in your position, good or bad. Sometimes we ask people for questions and we don't get questions. We get other stuff.
Are you going to ask me the one about my resignation or no?
Well, okay. When are you resigning?
I don't know. I have a couple years left.
Have you seen the cartoon? I was looking for whatchamacallit.
I did see the cartoon.
I guess you saw the cartoon.
Yeah.
Okay, because that was a question there. It was like, man, ask Myerberg if he saw my cartoon.
Right. I mean, I guess it's great that I have a cartoon. Did you think it was funny?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, in OPA's estimation, is there anything preventing SPD from instituting discipline prior to completion of an OPA investigation? Or does Acting Chief Diaz need OPA's investigation or concurrence? But I guess we saw he just fired the guy.
Yeah, well, he fired them after OPA issued the findings. So this is a really good question, and it's one that we've thought about a lot. It's an unsettled area. So technically the chief could, right? So the chief could tomorrow fire an officer without waiting for OPA's findings. But OPA is the only entity that can recommend a violation of policy. So by firing an officer, I think the chief would take a risk that an arbitrator could later say, no, you shouldn't have fired the officer because there was no finding. But I think it's an open question. But I think under certain circumstances, for example, if it was clear that an officer was dealing drugs or committed a felony, I think the chief could flat out fire them without waiting for OPA's investigation to occur.
Right. First part of this question here, what changes would need to take place for OPA to be able to provide binding consequences for officers' misbehavior? But I think that's just the structure of how oversight's set up is
right.
that you can't give binding consequences.
Well, I mean, you can. I mean, you just would have to change the city charter, right? The city charter, and that would have to be by constitutional amendment, but the city charter right now says that the chief of police is the final decider on hiring and firing a police officer. So if you wanted OPA or whatever you want, I mean, some people want a community board, I mean, pick your poison, but no matter what you did, you would have to change the city charter to create that entity and to allow that entity to make those decisions. And listen, there's benefits to doing that as well. One of the philosophies behind having the chief have that authority is that you want the chief to own the department. You want the chief to be responsible for the department. And if you bring a chief and say, well, you have no responsibility to hire and fire anyone, what kind of chiefs are you going to get in the Seattle Police Department? That was always the theory, but maybe the community perspective has changed and now people want that. And if they want it, change the charter.
Right. Question, why does an accused officer get a SPOG representative to do an interview, but victims have no advocate? If the point is accountability, then should there not be victim advocates?
So I have no problem with a victim advocate, with the philosophy behind a victim advocate. I mean, SPOG gets a representative because they're the ones that are subject to discipline and they have the union right to a representative. If someone wanted to bring someone with them, people regularly bring attorneys or other folks to support them in the interviews. We have no objection to that. If the question is, should there be an OPA-funded victim advocate or some system-funded victim advocate, I don't see that as being a problem. I think you would have to go through the channels and get budget for it, but I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Right. I think that King County, it's a bit different, but King County just provided, I think, attorneys for the families when there's an inquest.
Yeah, and I think the distinction there is that's a legal proceeding, right? So, but I think it's similar concept. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, there's no, again, a lot of what we do for officers, and I think this same poster asked a question about interviews. Why do we not conduct remote interviews of SPOG officers given the pandemic? And ideally we would. The union said no. We've made that request. Like, we don't want to be in-person interviews to be subject to COVID with our investigators. But the union controls, because it's in the contract, they can say, no, we're not going to do it. And we have no power to compel them to do the opposite.
Right. And there's another question here. Let's see, we got a few by the same person about mediation and when mediation is offered and what mediation is. Actually, so a lot of people that don't know mediation exists. And what kind of cases is mediation offered?
So this was a case, and this complainant had spoken to the South Seattle Emerald, and there was an article about this a couple months ago. So our investigators generally, when they're doing an interview, they may read off a script, and part of that script is, would you be interested in mediation? So we've since changed that because this complainant was saying, well, I was subjected to excessive force, it never should have been offered, and technically she's correct. So we've changed it, so now we don't offer it unless in certain circumstances. But generally what mediation does, and it's hard to do it given COVID, right? But what mediation does, it's really good for professionalism and sometimes bias allegations when it may be premised on a lack of understanding between a community member and a police officer. It brings the two of them together and says, let's discuss this. Here's what happened. This is why I did what I did. This is why I felt like I felt. And generally it's very successful, but it's tricky because we have to get everyone to agree. The complainant has to agree, the officers have to agree, and we need to actually be able to do it in person, which we can't do right now. So.
Yeah, I got a question for you
Yeah.
here. If we come back to, if you can remove from the stream audio, what's the biggest barriers here to your job, if any? If you're saying that there are any barriers to your job, or what are the biggest frustrations out here that you're encountering to you being able to how you envision your office, you're the director, how you envision it working, and to where it is right now? What are the biggest obstacles?
That's a good question. I mean, I think part of the biggest obstacle is kind of what we're doing here right now. It's the amount of a lack of understanding out there about what we do and why we do it and the parameters that we operate in and how these systems work. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that it's your fault or anyone else's fault. It's the system's fault, right? Because we haven't done a good job at communicating those things out. I think the primary frustration that I have is that I think it's never enough, right? So the reality is that our office, we sustain, we find that policies were violated in probably 25 to 30% of cases, right? It depends on the year, but around that much. And that's higher than virtually any other civilian or any other internal affairs agency across the country. Every single finding is posted online, right? We come on these shows, we post things on the internet, we have a dashboard, we get almost all of our cases done. 99% of our cases are done in a 6-month timeline, but it's never enough. Why don't you fire this person? The discipline's too low. I disagree. You're doing this, you're doing that. And that's okay, right? Everyone has an opinion. I think what we've seen though with the explosion of Twitter is it's all the systems are being attacked and said it's not enough, you're not doing enough, you're broken. So how do we fix that, right? How do we move forward and how do we rectify that? I don't know the answer. But I think certainly that's my biggest frustration. That's my biggest worry is that, ultimately I think, some people push for this community board to oversee police officer discipline. But what happens when that community board doesn't do what you want, right? Are those people out? Do you have to bring in a new community board? Is it only certain people that should be on the community board? It should be from the whole city? I think you go down a really slippery slope that has no end, right? Because then you're just preordaining your results. It's a kangaroo court. And my job is to push back on that a little bit, right? And that's why my job is so focused on policy and law, right? It's not opinion, it's policy and law. So I think, that's my main frustration. My main frustration is just lack of understanding, and that's on us, right? But also just mistrust on both sides of the aisle, from conservatives to liberals, mistrust of systems. I can go through other systemic issues with you. I wish we could do more for criminal investigations. I wish we could compel more there. I wish, arbitration could be reformed. I wish, there was more work on making our recommendations mandatory. There's all these different things that I would do, but those are some of the big issues.
There's one more thing. I know we're over time. I appreciate you hanging with us. There's one thing here, and maybe you can give an explanation. We touched on a little bit. We talked about legislation in Olympia. But again, this was with Inspector General Lisa Judge, and this interview is actually going to air tomorrow night, the full interview with Inspector General Lisa Judge talking about the Sentinel event review. And she talked about how, certain powers are curtailed and how, possibly through legislation down in Olympia, the landscape might change a bit.
I think the bigger question, though, is that authorities that were given in the ordinance to my office, to the OPA, were curtailed by the last collective bargaining agreement with SPOG. And so, I think the bigger question really is, are there things that the state legislature can do or that can be achieved in bargaining that ensure that accountability entities have the right authority and the legitimacy to do their work without being shortcutted or hamstrung by collective bargaining agreements. So, it's gonna take an effort on a lot of fronts to make some changes so that powers that police accountability entities need to have to do our jobs is there and can't be bargained away.
Yeah, I mean, like, can accountability be negotiated?
It shouldn't be negotiated. If there is a system in place to hold people accountable, they shouldn't be able to opt out of it. That seems pretty intuitive to me.
Inspector General Lisa Judge there, accountability shouldn't be negotiated. I'll just also talk some about the powers that have been limited. I think even more her office, the OIG's office, than the OPA's office by the collective bargaining agreement 2018 contract. And also she touched a little bit there about possible legislation down in Olympia.
Yeah, so I think, a couple questions there. I think as far as the collective bargaining agreement goes, generally, we've grown to kind of live with this collective bargaining agreement. It doesn't prevent us from finding that misconduct occurred. And when we get our cases done in the timelines, the bigger issue with the CBA can be the legal standards that it applies for arbitration and some of the risks around arbitration, because, we can do the best work that we can do. Everyone can do what they did. The chief can fire, and then it can get overturned by an arbitrator, right? So how do you protect against that? So there's legislation that's pending right now in Olympia that would do just that, is try to fix some of the flaws surrounding arbitration. There's other legislation that's been pushed by the ACLU and some representatives about collective bargaining, would be to say, anything accountability related, the city can implement. You don't have to bargain accountability. So I don't know that that's going to pass in Olympia, just because on both sides of the aisle, there's either support for law enforcement or support for labor. There's a legislation that would require officers to intervene. Representative Johnson, I don't know if you've ever met, he has been pushing a bill surrounding canines and tear gas and other tactics. So there's a lot going on right now. I think what we've realized here in Seattle is that there's no way to fix all this stuff just locally. You can't do it. There's just all these state components. And that doesn't mean that we're absolved from responsibility. We're not. But the state's got to work with us. The federal government's got to work with us. And I think that's what the opportunity that exists right now in Olympia.
Right. And before I let you go here, and I just want to throw this out here so we can hopefully have some clarity of how this system works, because I'm just looking at the comments and we're just a complex kind of process and simple at the same time. But basically, your job is to see if an officer's action violated policies.
Exactly.
And you don't make, your office, OPA, doesn't make the policies.
Nope.
Your job is to say, was this in policy or not? And there very well could be a bad policy that you can make a recommendation saying, hey, man, you know what? This officer didn't violate the policy, but this policy is bad. I think you guys should change it.
Or on the other hand, there could be a policy where the policy is bad and the officer violated the policy, but the officer violated it because the policy is bad or because the training was bad, right? So in those situations, like, I would recommend a policy change. Right. And we do it frequently. Right.
And I mean, I want to be clear with this, is that if people, the bigger issue here seems to be as well the policies themselves. If your office is as fair and whatever as you say that it is, and people are like, oh, there's so many things that are unsustained, and you're taking officers' actions and you're putting it up against the policy, then people need to be looking at the policing policy.
Right. And I just think, again, like, perspective, right? And yes, you're correct, right? But like,
just in the mechanics.
Yeah, just in the mechanics. But like, for example, look at the decision by Judge Jones recently, right? In the sanctions order and the temporary restraining order that he just issued. So he's applying the same law that we are, right? The findings that we've reached are very similar to the findings he's reached. Again, the force that's out of policy is indiscriminate force where there's no threat, right? So we're not an outlier, right? And again, like, if you compare it to precedent all through the courts, right? We're not an outlier. And if there is a problem, and I think you said it perfectly, the problem is with Graham v. Connor. It's with the reasonableness standard. It's with the deference it gives to officers. And maybe it's with us too. What do I know? I think everyone's always going to have a problem with us. But at the same time, change the law, right? Change that policy. Go to the legislature. And whatever the policy is, I will apply it. That is my job. And I will advocate in the legislature, and I've already done it for other things. I think I've sent you our materials. But again, like, that's my job. I can't freelance. I can't do that, because then due process falls apart.
Somebody asked a good question here, and it's probably a good way to also tell the public how they can reach your office. Somebody said, hey, is there a list of policy recommendations that you've made that you can make available to the public so the public can support you in those policy recommendations you made?
Yeah, everything's online, and I'll shoot a link over to you, Amari, that you can post. But not only is every policy recommendation online, we also give you a database of what SP's response was to the policy, why they declined it, why they implemented it, what they did. Again, this is our fault. It's not the community's fault, whatever the community is, but it's our fault, right? We need to make the information more available. We need to post the information more. But anything that people want from us, any of this information that they're looking for is already on our website. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Director Myerberg, I've kept you over time. I appreciate you staying. I kept you almost 30 minutes over. And
appreciate it. Thanks, Amari.
I appreciate you answering questions. And I know that we'll see you again when these findings come out about the East Precinct.
Happy to do so.
And I'm gonna have to figure out how to read some of these things on an iPad, so I stop killing all the trees. Stop killing the trees. We're gonna take a short break. When we come, Trey Holiday is here, and we're gonna end it in a good way. We always gotta end the show in a positive way. So we're gonna talk about some music. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Sure. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back, Bay Holiday. Hey. Oh man, you know what I'm saying? It's always a sweat box. You get in there. Like the thing is just on Pink Umbrella. I could talk to Director Myerberg for about an hour, 2 hours, just on that Flashpoint day. It's like, man, what were the police tactics? And some of that's going to go to the Sentinel event review, and that's what the Office of Inspector General is doing. Lisa Judge is looking at everything from this summer and now making a policy. Like, okay, should the police be 2 feet from a barricade when there's a static protest from yada yada? You see some stuff they've been to put the big speakers up there because people couldn't hear. People couldn't, there's so many things was out there, but I could talk to them for days about it. But man, this is something real amazing right here. And where should I put this?
The wide, yeah.
The wide is there. And so, man, this is a record that Jake Gravbrot found, right? It's In the Heat of the Night, and it's Quincy Jones. There we go. Quincy Jones and Ray Charles. And for people that know, when we talk about the history of the Central District, it's an amazing story. Ray Charles made his way up here to Seattle because, back in the day, we had this happening jazz and blues music scene here. You know what I'm saying? Waldron had one of the best jazz schools in America, was right here in Seattle. And, Ray Charles hooked up with Quincy Jones, and the rest is history. A lot of people don't know. Ray Charles was running around the Central District, right up there on 23rd and Jackson. Man, Jay Gravbrot found this find here, this record. We're going to bring him in and talk about it real quick. Where's Jake at? All right, Mr. Gravbrot.
Hey.
How are you? So tell us about this record, man. Where you found it and how rare it is.
Well, I'll tell you one thing: when you find a Quincy Jones vinyl, you buy it. I mean, the guy has 80 Grammy nominations, which is a record. So he's an absolute living legend, and Seattle is very fortunate to be able to call him one of our sons. So I found the vinyl, which is actually a soundtrack to the movie In the Heat of the Night from 1967. I found that at an antique store actually on the waterfront that's not too far from here. It's one of the only antique stores that still actually exists on the waterfront, and they've been open every day. And on my normal walks, I actually I go past it quite often, so I've kind of become friendly with the owner over the years, and I always stop in there. And they've got a pretty good selection of records that exist from really kind of back in like the 80s to about probably the 40s or 50s. And I found this one last week, and I saw Quincy on the cover immediately, and then was like, oh my gosh, it's also Ray Charles. And knowing the history that those two have together and how it intertwined in Seattle lore, I just knew it was something that had to be copped. So I got it for $15. And I remember one of the things that you said to me when I first got it was, whatever you paid for this, it's worth far more.
Yeah, this is crazy. And then for people who remember In the Heat of the Night, the movie, and then they came back later on with the series, man. You know what I'm saying? That was family watching it, the Black Home. Hey, Jake, man, we're gonna let you off the hook here, because people been saying, how can Jake find an antique record, but he didn't know there was the graffiti Converge sweatshirt in the store.
I don't know how I missed that, but I did. I got an eye for music, and so when it comes to that kind of stuff, well, you won't catch me missing too many things.
Well, I appreciate it. And what we got here is, we didn't get it set up before the show, but we have the turntables and the old school phonograph, and we're gonna have to listen to this. But I thought this was kind of something special to talk about here at the end of the show. Quincy Jones and Ray Charles, just to let people know, we appreciate the heritage of our neighborhood. We appreciate the heritage of the Central District. And like I said, it's an amazing story how Ray Charles came out here to Seattle and hooked up with Quincy Jones. And like they say, the rest is history. So this really is like a piece, small piece or a link to the Central District.
Absolutely. Right, and I see you, Jake, with that Central District t-shirt on today. I gotta give you a shout out, because I see you. You got the right fit on with the right message today, brother.
Yeah, I pay tribute in whatever ways I possibly can. And I thought, if we're going to come on and talk about Quincy Jones today, I got to put that Central District shirt back on. I've had it for about 12 years, so it's maybe 10, 11, 12 years. I don't know. It's old, but you know what? The Central District is old too, and there's a lot of heritage there, and we got to rep it as much as we possibly can. So
right.
Jake's just mad eclectic, huh?
Yeah, he's eclectic.
He's eclectic. All right, Jake, we're gonna let you go. By the way, thanks for the photos yesterday.
No problem.
Mr. Gravbrot. Yeah. So, like I said, we never want to end the show in leaving people in an affected state and talking about police violence, police issues. A lot of times very triggering to our audience. So, adjust the energy. Any last words, Bay Holiday, before we get out of here for today?
I got a busy day. I'm sure many of you do too. Just again, thank you for, watching the stream. There was, 8,000 folks or whatever you told me watching yesterday. And I just appreciate it. That was my first time really being live out there. So thanks to y'all.
You was out there doing it too. Let me go ask a question. I can go find the youth. Hey, what's going on? This and that. All right. So like I said, tomorrow night, there it is. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. after the coronavirus update show, we have the interview that we did with the Inspector General of Police, Lisa Judge. And the Inspector General is talking about the Sentinel Event Review, which is a review of everything for this summer to try to figure out how the Seattle Police Department can make policy changes to their policy. So good conversation. I talked to the Inspector General for about an hour. What's really good is these people give Converge the time. Yeah. Even Myerberg today, said he was only supposed to stay like 20 minutes. He ended up staying almost like 45 minutes on here. We got an hour with the Inspector General. So that's tomorrow. So tomorrow, 6:15 p.m., me and producer Nikki Barron for the coronavirus update show, barring something crazy happening. And then 7 p.m. is the interview with Inspector General Lisa Judge. And if there's nothing else, Trey Holiday, until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice. rejoicing, dearer than heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun.